financial freedom doesn't just come about whenever you want it to. It just doesn't, you don't just stumble into it, right? If you do absolutely nothing with your money right now, you don't end up in a very great position. So you have to invest. That is your only opportunity to get to something pretty spectacular from an end result. If you're just spending every single bit of money that you have, you're not really going to get there. So this session is all about what Bushy Martin, the guy that we have on the podcast, this guy's been in property for decades now. He is an expert mortgage broker from Know How Property and Know How Finance, and he's got an incredible podcast that you got to check out called Get Invested. It is well worthwhile going into, but it's all about how do you build that path to get to your end result. And what we're doing is a massive presentation around how a normal couple is going to build their way to financial freedom. They need $150,000 of passive income, and how are they actually going to get there? There is the option if they do nothing. There's the option as if they don't do it incredibly well, they buy terrible assets. And then there's the option that we would not recommend financial advice or anything like that, but the smart way a smart property investor would go about it. This is very structured, very strict. This is not one really you can listen to as a podcast. You've got to really take the visuals in as well. Well worth a listen. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let's jump into the session.
Into that, just to put some real shape around who we're talking about. We're talking about Jess and Michael Jones, and these are fictitious, by the way. Their names have been changed to protect the innocent, like we should. They're in their early 40s. Jess is an engineer. She's earning just under 200 grand a year. Michael's the stay-at-home dad, and he's a part-time public servant, so he's earning about 44 grand. They've got some super combined. They've got some shares. They've got some funds starting to pull on the offset, and their home's currently worth about 1.2. They live in WA, and they've got a 615 grand home loan, a 10 grand credit card, and a couple of kids. So that's who they are. In terms of their profile, they're extremely time poor, like most Aussies. Very conservative on their outlook, quite risk averse, so they don't want to take any risks. They've got very little property knowledge. Don't know where to start or who to trust, and they're pretty keen to play it safe because I just don't want to put anything at risk. So let's have a look at the typical approach, and I'm going to dance through this one pretty quickly because I just don't want to bore people to death. But they've heard about property. You couldn't help but hear about property because it's about all the newspapers have got to talk about. To scare us with these days is property, which is great for property. But all their friends and neighbours are buying them. They don't want to miss out. Their accountant says, you better buy a property to save some tax. How many times have you heard that, guys? But they want to get a cheap property pretty close to where they live because they don't want to get too far out of their comfort zone. And I've actually heard that south of Perth is a bit of a hotspot. So their ears are pricking up because it's not too far from where they are. So they end up going and buying an old cheap 2-bed unit for 450 grand. It's giving them $430 a week rent. It's in a group of 6 in that nearby hotspot zone. They go to their bank and they borrow the lot with because they want the lowest rate, of course. So they get a P&I loan, no LMI, and they do the old serviette exercise, which I see a lot of investors do. They go, okay, $430 a week rent minus the $502 in loan repayments. That means it's only going to cost me $72 a week. Yeah, that's okay. That's pretty damn good. I'm off to the races. And why would we waste the money on a property manager? Because we live pretty close. We're only half an hour from it, so we'll look after that ourselves. Happy days. I mean, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? Yep, exactly. So reality kicks in though. From day one, suddenly they're starting to get a bit of a hole in their pocket. Spending a lot of time on the property managing all the tenant issues and the tenants coming and going and not paying rent and all the palaver that goes with it. Then they rock up to the accountant at tax time. He actually runs all the numbers based on all the costs involved in the property, and suddenly he makes them aware that they're actually 31 grand a year in the red. And that's pre the tax refund. So they're going to get about $7,000 back in tax on that property, which is not bad. But they're having to wait for a year to get that. So in the meantime, it's costing them just shy of $600 a week out. Then in 5 years' time, because they didn't know it, but they bought at the peak of the market and things have sort of softened off and gone a bit sideways. So it's only gone up about 3% on average. No surprise. All the pain. They assumed it was going to go up on a linear pathway year after year, which I still hear a lot of investors say. So 5 years in, they go, this is too hard. It's too painful. We're not making enough out of it. It's costing us money. Sell the bloody thing. Let's get it. What did we do wrong? So what did we do wrong, guys? Tell me, what did we do wrong?
Well, I think for me, bought based on the hotspot. You know, someone said, the newspaper said, the article said, buy in this area because it's grown 60, 70% already. That's amazing. That's one of the things I see a lot. These hotspot markets start to get like a second wind from, the media, because news.com and realestate.com has the data's in. It's grown 40% this year. And it's like, yeah, but that might be a time to move on to the next one. Not necessarily saying it is, if there's the supply and demand metrics there, but for me, it's just not being smart about where you purchased. And property management by yourself, don't get a property manager. They don't charge much
unless you're really interested in doing it, and are prepared to.
Even then, Jeff, my wife used to own and run a very successful property management business, and she's still got a finger on the pulse. It is so litigious, and so the legislation is now first and foremost looks after the tenant. If you don't have someone who knows the legislation to the nth degree, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous position, potentially very costly position, because you've only got to miss a couple of key dates and suddenly you're not protected at all, because it's all going to slant to the tenant. I just wouldn't take the risk for that. It's probably going to cost you 4 cups of coffee a week to have your property managed. That's about what it's going to equate to. It's something like that. So if someone wants to give themselves a second job when they don't have any time, and they're prepared to put a very expensive asset at the risk of a few cups of coffee a week, good luck with that.
So someone's jumped out. Tim jumped in the comments. No advice, no property management, no knowledge. Just went in blind. Did what they were told by a friend at the barbecue situation. What's the answer?
Great comment. There's a bunch, and I won't dwell on this too much. But number one, buying the cheapest property close to home. The big assumptions that still, I'm staggered at some of these, but I'd still find a lot of people assume that all properties and banks are pretty much like commodities. So they're all going to perform and grow the same. So we just need to get the cheapest. That is still, just amazes me how much that thought still pervades. And of course, they bought the wrong type of property in the wrong area at the wrong time. Not saying that it's easy to buy at the right time, because you only know that in hindsight, and it's like buying shares. You never know when the bottom or top was until after the event, but you can still stack the deck in your favour. They thought they could do it better themselves, but really didn't know what they didn't know. They focused on the lowest rate loan, and it was principal interest. So it was a low rate loan, but the costs of actually holding the property increased pretty substantially. They hadn't factored in all the costs because they didn't sit down and work them out. They bought them in joint names, so they missed out on a bunch of tax credits that could have really softened the blow for them. They didn't know what the property needed to do other than make money. That was pretty much the extent of their strategy. So if you sum that up, and I could talk a lot more about this, but they didn't crunch the numbers and they didn't have a strategy. And that really is just the tip of the iceberg. I just wanted to sort of set the tone on that. And again, I know that most people listening to this show will be way beyond that. But I'll guarantee there are people on this show who have friends, family, and work colleagues who are thinking about getting into property. Talk to them. Make sure they don't go down that pathway. Help them. If you're listening, you've probably, and I made a lot of these mistakes myself, by the way, when I started off. So it's pretty easy for me to put this together
Yeah.
because I didn't trust anyone. I wanted to reinvent the wheel, and I was making expensive mistakes, and I didn't even know it until after the event. But
Yeah.
there's no excuse now. There is so many good, so much good information through your show and others that can help people to do that. If you really want to pay it forward, then talk to others to get them on the same pathway. And I think the other thing is that there's a lot of wrong assumptions still about property. Again, that focuses on the property and the sexy bit, and the assumption that they all perform the same. The other thing that I touched on before is that there's this sort of unvoiced assumption that property is going to go up in value year on year in a linear fashion. Now, we've sadly, particularly for people who've got into property post-COVID, we've lived in, that's been the second highest property boom in the 260-year history of Australia, guys. That's, that is massive. And it's created this artificial feeling that, wow, anyone can make money in property. You just got to buy one and sit back and let it do it. We're about to find out in a big hurry. I think things are, I hate using the word normal, but they're returning to more normal conditions. And there'll be a lot of areas that will flatline if they don't have future growth drivers attached. Let's now dive into the smart investor. And again, I've touched on this already, but the really smart investors, if we look at sustainable success in anything, that's not just property, it is the combination of self-help and wealth. And let me get specific about what I mean by that, the three L's. You'll get sick of my really bad sense of humor and shocking acronyms that I come up with, but it's easy to stick in your head. The self is your mindset, beliefs, bias, expectations, risk, outlook, and perceptions. It's how you read and see the world. And if you haven't got that headset right, you're doomed before you start. So there's a lot of stuff and the education, again, if you dive into education, listen to shows like yours, reading books, doing the programs, you will develop the mindset, increase your knowledge, and reduce the fear. That's enforced through the health piece. And the second part of that is the health piece. And I'm not talking about going to the gym. I'm talking about your money habits, the patience, persistence, and resilience muscles that you're going to need to last the distance on property. Because I firmly believe it's a long-term game. You might get some short-term wins, but you're likely to be a one-hit wonder. If you're looking for sustainable success, which is for me, property has been about funding my lifestyle, so I've got time to spend on things that are important. Then if you can't manage $10, you won't manage 10 million. It's about as simple as that. You really need to get your money habits and that long-term outlook into gear. Because if you don't have those two working for you, you're never going to achieve any sustainable wealth, I can tell you right now. And if you just focus on wealth and you don't get the habits and the mindset right, then you'll shipwreck yourself at some stage. There's nothing surer.
I tend to agree with that, just briefly, because whatever works for you, as in, like, I'm quite a detailed. I love a good spreadsheet. I love things laid out for me. I love forecasting. For some people, that would not be for them. That would scare them. They'd be like, "Oh no, that's going to look ugly in a couple of months." But to me, I see the number and I'm like, "Okay, cool. I know what the number looks like." Some people. So if you're just a high headline number, one number, if that works for you, then make sure you figure out what sort of resonates, what floats your boat, because but just make sure you're doing it. But back to this, the strategy is very personal. As I just said.
I'll tell you what I mean by this one. Everyone talks about strategy now. I reckon it's the most overused word in property, these days. And sadly, a lot of what I think is pushed as strategy is just sort of thinly disguised marketing tactics to sell property. And they're more tactical than they are strategic. Because the other thing that I just want to really reinforce here is that there is no silver bullet. There's no one way to make money on property. Property is agnostic when it comes to that. So what you need to do, if we're using those self-help wealth templates, is craft a strategy that reflects you, your outlook, your capability, and your comfort level. And then make sure it's also in line with your timeline, your physical capability. All of those things need to be weaved into the mix. It's a it's a pretty big, it's like a Rubik's Cube trying to put this together if you do it properly. But if you just follow the next person that you've spoken to and it doesn't sit with your risk appetite and your sleep at night factor, you won't succeed. If it doesn't match your timeline, you won't succeed. If your affordability, both from a purchase perspective and an ongoing holding cost exercise isn't right, you won't succeed. So you really need to develop a bit of a dashboard that's going to enable you to craft a personal strategy that's suited directly to you and you alone. And yes, there are some common pieces we need to contemplate, but if someone comes to you and says they have the only magic and secret sauce, run, because it's likely it's not going to work for you. And I guess what goes with that, guys, is that unless you're really clear on your lifestyle strategy, and I'm going to keep coming back to lifestyle strategy because property is the vehicle, that's what we're focused on. What I do see a lot of investors do, if they're not clear on their why and where they're heading, they drown themselves in data, and then they can't see the forest from the trees. And then that becomes a procrastination element, or they'll use the data on the wrong data to make decisions that get them into the wrong sort of property at the wrong time. Again, I'm just going. This is where the raw comes in, guys, because I'm always looking for an analogy, but I treat success in property as like taking a round the world trip. And if we're going to take an around the world trip over many years, we're going to hit some turbulence. We are going to have issues. It's not a matter of if you're going to have problems with property. It's just a matter of when. But if you've got the right team and the right flight path and the right fuel, and you've got the contingency in place, things aren't a problem. They're just a challenge to overcome. And the key thing that drives that is, are you raw with yourself? So this is where the raw comes in. Are you ready in terms of equity and savings? Are you able in terms of your capacity and financial position? But most importantly, are you willing in terms of your mindset and your outlook? Because if you get those right, then you've got the elements of a dashboard that you're going to start creating that will act like a GPS, because it's not a roadmap. When I hear people talk about the roadmap, the property, well, again, that's not likely to work because your specific needs and goals will change over time. What you want today won't be what you want in a few years' time. Also, property conditions are going to continue to change. It's, trying to forecast what's going to happen in property is like trying to forecast the weather. And we know how successful weather forecasters are. They're not. So what you need to develop, though, is a GPS that focuses on the key numbers that are going to motivate you as a magnet and guide you as a compass. Because if you're clear on where you're heading and you come off track because your needs, goals, or changes, or the property conditions change, as long as you know the end destination, you can track back towards it by taking some corrective action at the appropriate time. And the key elements of that dial are what I call the Trinity, and I call it a strategy. Again, another really bad play on words, guys, so forgive me. But instead of strategy, it's strategy. And it's really integrating the three key components of your lifestyle. So get clear on how you want to live, what you want to do, and what you need to do. And I'm going to break that down into the freedom numbers in a minute. And then have a look, compare that with what you can do, which is the financing piece. And that comes down to what I'm going to call the bare facts, which I'll break the bare facts down in a minute. And those two will drive what you need and can do in the property side. So property is last. If you haven't got clear on your lifestyle and you haven't got clear on your capability, you're not going to know what you really should be doing in the property sphere. So they're the key bits there. Any comments?
Yeah, they're the fundamentals, right? Like, where do you want to go? How are you practically going to get there? And then what's going to be the vehicle that's going to allow that to happen?
So it's like the ultimate wealth goal sort of tracker, Joe, which I agree with Bushy. It is going to evolve, because if you've just got this static sort of set of numbers, it is going to change. Like you'll lose your job, unfortunately. You'll get a pay increase. You'll start a business, and then you can maybe bring that forward a little bit. So it's all about making sure you adjust. It's not necessarily static, but yeah.
Just to sort of give you an example of what you guys have touched on there, I had an investor who came to see me. This is quite some years ago back in Adelaide. And he came into the meeting with 4 investment property books and a spreadsheet that went for about a mile. And I said, talk to me about your plan. He said, well, in 4 years and 3 months' time, I'm going to have a baby. And then I'm going to get the first property and the second property. And that's going to mean this. I'm going to do that. My income's going to be here. And then we're going to do this. He had his whole life mapped out. He's an engineer, used to sort of getting down to that level of detail. And I said, I love your ambition, but I want you to keep that spreadsheet and bring it to me when we catch up in a couple of years' time and see whether it actually lines up. And he's done well because, again, he's focused on it, but it was very different to what he'd spent. Clearly, he'd spent weeks putting that together, his life plan. But his wife had other ideas and things went in different directions, and his career went in different directions. Still done okay, but it was very different to what he suggested. So that's why I say it needs to be a GPS. So you just need the key dials that are going to allow you to navigate back to where you want to be, or in fact change the end destination if that is the case, because that may happen as well. But at least you've got a means to measure and track how that's going, which means that you can sort of adapt and pivot when and if required. The key thing that I wanted just to take away is if you are able to get down to your bare facts and your freedom numbers, then you do have a dashboard that can start to drive the process. Yes, you do need, if we were doing some work with you, we put you through our willing test, which we dive deep on a whole bunch of questions to get a really good sense of where your head's at and what your outlook and expectations are to make sure that it is sustainable. And again, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the screen there, which is part of the dashboard that you really need to take on board. And if I use an analogy, if you've seen a sound engineer mix stuff for a band or a record, the number of dials and levers that they need to pull to produce the quality sound are very similar to how much information you need to weave into to really think about what the right strategy is for you. So you take that on board. For these guys, given what we've spoke about, growth focus, so a standalone home in a tightly held location is what they need to look at. They're in the mid-range of cash flow affordability. So again, I wouldn't be getting them into a home that's any more than 20 years old because we're going to need the depreciation to work for us. Their time horizon is 15 years. So that will go through a complete S-curve. The average growth, again, there's this myth that keeps getting perpetrated that property doubles in value every 10 years. It is a myth. If you actually do the research, and I've sat down and done it and compared it with Simon Presley, he's about as anal as I am when it comes to the researching the numbers. The average time it takes to go through a full growth cycle is 15 years. And it's not a beautiful exponential curve. It's an S curve that spikes 2 to 3 years, like we've just seen from COVID. It flattens out for 5 to 10%, goes horizontal for up to 8 years, and then goes through its next growth spike if the 3 eyes are in play. So their time horizon is good because they'll go through a worst case exercise there. They're risk averse, so they need a low touch property, and they've got low knowledge, so they're going to need to have a proven team around them in each of the key positions to make sure that they don't get themselves into hot water. So they're the key bits.